Rabbi Show. And remember, if you have any questions for the Rabbi, 772-340-1590, because we're live right now.
We are. We're here in the studio. That was a cute sound. I'm sure that picked up nicely. And I am in the process of getting my extra equipment set up. That always takes me a second or two. But getting back to which is easier or better, I think it's a function of what works for the student, for that individual student, what they like. Some of the differences between Kaiser and IRSC also are class sizes. Easy for me to say, yeah. IRSC has larger classes. I typically have 40 students in a class at IRSC. And with Kaiser, I'll have anywhere from a couple of students. We'll even run a class for one student if a student needs it. That's done as an independent study. I believe that IRSC will do that too if students, for example, really need it to finish up a program and for some reason there's a hole. Because I have taught as few as 3 or 4 students at IRSC, but it's not common.
Now, are students still using Zoom on some of the classes?
Well, yes and no. Inside Blackboard, there is Blackboard Live. If you're at Kaiser, it's called Kaiser Live. So there is a Zoom-like function within the software. So people use that. And yeah, so and for example, the summer school classes that I'm teaching right now, one is completely online and the other is what's called hybrid. And the hybrid class is half and half. So you're both online and in class. It's a mix. The idea being that you get a little bit of connection in class, half the time you're in class, and the other is you're online. And that's important because some students need that touch of a little bit of class time, a chance to talk to the professor and ask questions. And the other thing is sometimes people have jobs that interfere with doing a whole lot of class time in face to face. So if you've got a very variable schedule, that could have an effect on it, things like that. So there's lots of different reasons why people do different things. We're obviously no longer in COVID, but obviously, again, if you have COVID, you're expected to self-isolate. And that's just a good idea if you're sick for any reason. So the hybrid ones are a little easier for that because you don't have the, you're strictly doing things online. But I will tell you, there's a big difference in being online and being in class because you get a lot more feedback and information when it's in person. You really do. And not everybody can handle when you're online, if you don't know something, as a rule, it is expected that you will pick up the slack and learn. And one of the things that I don't think we're doing a good job right now is in teaching our students how to do that. Okay, I think that that's one of the critical pieces. So let's see. Yay, I was down there anyway. All right, so I think that's a big difference. But I think that students coming out of our high schools now are not at all taught how to teach themselves. Yes, all of them can watch a YouTube, but they don't know how to find what they need on YouTube. They need somebody to walk them through that. And it's interesting. It takes often a whole semester to teach students that they need to do some of the learning on their own, that they have to seek it out. That's probably one of the biggest stressors for me. I'll give you an example out of this term. At IRSC, I do what's called a 5-part term paper. They write a really long 2,000-word term paper, but they write it in 500-word increments. So they write 4 parts and they tie it together and write another few words to hit the 2200, and should not be hard for them. And the first part of it, they get to pick a topic. And the instruction is look through the topics in the class and then pick one that you're going to work on because you're going to be spending the whole semester with this subject. And I actually had a student who texted me, and the opening of the text was, I did this assignment wrong because you didn't give me enough instruction. And I said, well, what instruction did I not give you? The instruction was to look through the modules and pick a topic. Well, what is my topic? And I said, that's the assignment. You have to pick it. But what is my topic? It comes back. It's like, that's not for me to tell you. That's for you to tell me and get approved. You check in with me to make sure that you're not going off on some branch that you're going to saw off behind you. And that's really what I look for. So students will pick any of there are 7 modules in the course, and everything except for the first one is there for you. So yeah. So here's a crazy thing. I had a student complain to me today, actually yesterday, that they didn't like having 3 of the modules, of those 7 modules. They all have little assignments in them. And in order to allow the students to get started, I delay the first 2 modules so that the first 3 appear to come boom, 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 like 2 days apart in their due dates. And the student complained that that was too close together. There should be fewer modules. And I'm like, whether we do it in fewer modules, you're still going to have the same amount of material. You have to do 3 credits worth of work. That's the piece. There's a certain amount. And it's based on the number of hours that you're going to spend in class on the material and the number of hours that you're going to spend doing homework. So those are the things that define what's 3 credits. It's called contact hours. How much work is the student going to have to do? And that makes sense. And you gear it to the level. So you expect a graduate student, for example, to do a higher level of, they're still doing the same amount of work, but they're doing it at a higher level. If the undergrad student were to do that, they would spend many more hours doing it. And that's the criteria. Am I teaching this class at a level that's appropriate to the students coming in? And I will tell you that candidly, students are coming in with fewer skills than even 10 years ago.
Are you catching any of them using AI for
yeah.
assistance?
Yeah. And in fact, I had one student who kind of had the chat narrative going on with it, which said, I can't look at this video, or the assignment was to watch a video and to discuss it. And the chat comment was, I can't watch a video, but it likely covered this and this and this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the very least you need to do is read the output and not just assume that it's correct. He's telling you he can't do it because you're asking him to do something that's not within AI's bailiwick.
That's like when Google or Siri says, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, very much. And you get some of that. They don't read, they type in their prompt and they just copy and paste, and no, it doesn't work. And there's a very distinct look. I think that professors are, if they're not, shame on them. That there's a certain look that you have to AI-generated material. Now, I have no problem with a student using AI as an aid, as a guide. Ask it what subjects, what topics you should discuss for a certain topic, and they'll do a real good job of looking out and telling you what the current expectations are for that. Now, if you want to be a little creative, of course, that's not going to work. That's the thing. People think that AI is creative. It's not. It homogenizes what's out there. And it does so according to a very specific algorithm. And so it has a certain rhythm. It has its own vocabulary, and it has a way of repeating itself that is not academic. And, I know that my niece, who wrote copy, who's an ad copywriter, and she was terrified that AI would replace her. And it might for some very simple ads, but it certainly wouldn't have the spark of creativity that she brought to her work. And I see some wonderful things, but I also see a lot of really horrible things coming out of AI. I have been asking AI to generate a picture of a dog for a little over a year, and it has not yet gotten it correct.
Really?
Yeah,
A dog?
a dog. Well, it's a very specific dog.
Oh.
So I ask it for a white powder puff Chinese crested with a black ear. And I have yet, very often they don't have ears, and that's one of the pieces of the prompt. And quite often they're not even Chinese cresteds.
The ear algorithms are failing.
Yes, something is definitely failing. I mean, it comes out with some cute things, but they're not what I'm asking for. And it's kind of, I noticed that that's another thing I've noticed. We're really good at creating humanistic characters, right? So we're good at dogs that walk, cats that walk, and have hands, even if they're paws, they operate like hands. And so there's one overriding algorithm out there that's for a humanoid kind of movement. But I want a picture of, I want to create a video of a dog walking, and it can't do it. It has it walking like a person.
Upright.
Yeah, not going to work.
Only extremely talented dogs could do that.
Well, and I've had dogs that can, but it's not the way that I'm looking for the art for this project. And so, yeah, I'm looking for some very simple artwork. And it's interesting, right? Because I love doing art. I love doing painting. I do a number of other things. Drawing is not, I can paint, but I can't draw. As funny as that
Now,
sounds.
see, I can draw, but I can't paint.
Yeah, so
I could
everybody's
draw a
got
picture,
different
you know.
talents. And as Einstein said, right, we all have different kinds of genius. And if you judge a fish by how well it climbs a tree,
You can't do that.
you can't do that. And we all need to be assessed within our skill set according to what kind of talent we have. And everybody brings something different. So yeah, so this has been a challenge, but it's something that I'm going to master as soon as I'm finished with this degree at Liberty. And actually, I'm taking an art course with Liberty, so maybe
Wow.
I'll have a chance to
Yet
work on that.
another degree. in the
No,
works.
no, it's just a class within my degree.
Oh, okay. All right, within.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, and that's as good a thing as any. It's good. Good time to mention. I bring the card with me and then I don't take it out. That's sometimes, Shafir. Sometimes I talk to myself like everybody else does. All right, so, and the thing that I said that I needed to get out, and that's so that I have the phone number, because I don't have that memorized, and that's for Change of Mind, where I offer counseling, I and some other really great counselors, including my supervisor, Eric Lever. I am an intern. I'm a registered mental health counselor intern under the supervision of Eric Lever, who is a licensed mental health counselor. And that's at Change of Mind on 314 Northwest Bethany Drive, Port St. Lucie, Florida. The phone number there is 772-284-6030. And if you call, ask for Rose or Mary Ellen, and they'll be glad to help you set up a session with either with me or with one of the other great counselors that are there. Any of us will be glad to work with you. And we work with all different kinds of things. We help people with depression, anxiety, anger management, family conflicts, gender issues, trauma and complex trauma, dissociative disorders. We're also doing testing for PDD-BI and dyslexia. So those are some things. And if you need somebody to help you work with an autistic, or to find out if your child is autistic, or if you yourself might be, because some people reach adulthood and they don't have the diagnosis and they don't understand why they're struggling with certain things. And we can help with that. So, yeah, many different things. And Bethany Drive, the offices there are behind the Bills and Home Center. It's behind where Publix used to be. I always love when people give those kind of directions. It's you can actually go down between Publix and the gym, and then you turn right on the back road, and that'll get you to the offices as well. But you can also just tool on down Bethany, and it'll be the next left after the traffic light if you're heading north on it. So yeah, lots of exciting things. We also, from the congregation standpoint, we're getting ready for High Holy Days. It's hard to believe, but they're right around the corner. They are the first Wednesday night of October, and that Thursday morning is Rosh Hashanah. We'll be doing that actually across the street from where we normally meet. We'll be doing that at the Methodist Church. That's the Three Corners with Sportsman Park is where we meet. But we'll be over at the Methodist Church in one of their rooms for Rosh Hashanah, and then back in our regular space for Yom Kippur. So lots of exciting things coming, and yeah, we hope that all works for everyone. Check us out on any Friday night, Congregation Eitz Chayin, and our website is www.eitzchayin.org, eitzchayin.org, or you can catch us on Facebook. And we have services on Friday nights. It's every Friday, 7:30 p.m. with an Oneg Shabbat following. Yes, that's food, folks. And on third Fridays, we actually do a full Shabbat dinner. So you can check any of that out. And we welcome anyone to come and see what we're about. We just come together and celebrate the Shabbat. It's actually just I hope, a great gathering for people who come. And if you've got a question for me now for Ask a Rabbi, you can call at 772-340-1590. 1590. Do we have a caller?
Yes, we have a caller. Russ is with us.
Thank you, Russ.
I've got a question. In the last 20 years, the Christian religion has been saying perfect God. And I don't ever remember that as a kid growing up Catholic, anyone ever saying God is perfect. I was wondering where the Jews stand on that.
Okay, Jews don't spend a lot of time focusing on that at all. God is just God. And part of the problem, obviously, with perfect is what is perfect? Right? Because that's
kind of what I got.
Yeah.
Plus, if you take Christianity into account, I mean, that pretty much says he wasted 4,000 years on Jewish people, and that there alone is kind of a mistake, if you ask me.
Well, okay. Christianity theoretically doesn't say that. I know some Christians do. If you look at the prodigal son story, the Jews are the son who stays, not the one who wanders. So that's something to realize. We never left God. God never left us. That's a promise forever between us. And that's something to be aware of. And that doesn't mean that we have the only way to God. We just actually read in Torah a story of a character named Bilam or Balaam, depending on how you pronounce it. The Hebrew is Bilam. And it's recognized that he practices a connection with God that's different from Judaism, and it works. The question that Jews would have for any other religion is, do you harm God's creatures in the practice of your religion? And that's where we take issue with people. So, but the other challenge with all of the superlatives relating to God, the other one that I often challenge my classes on is if God can do anything, right? If God is omnipotent, all powerful, can God create something over which God has no power? And that's problematic because if God can't, then God is not all powerful. But if God can, then God is no longer all powerful because now there's something over which God has no power. And of course,
the way I heard that was, can God create a rock he can't lift?
Right.
A little simple.
Yeah, it's a version of it.
You're right.
And regardless of, and the problem with that is that we're dealing with human constructs, not with God constructs. And to try to, the philosopher and theologian Maimonides said, that God is something that humans can't know because of God's infiniteness and God's transcendentness, right? God's beyond what we are able to understand and perceive. The only thing that we can perceive is how immense and impossible and beyond us that entity or force or whatever it is is. And so one of the ways that I typically work with that is I say that God is the force that creates breath in human beings and other living things. And I think most of us can agree that we do something called breathing. And it is the difference between life and death, and God is the source of that. And after that, it's all a function of your experience and your faith. And if we could,
Right.
if we could get to that place, I think we'd understand each other a little better. There's many different ways up a mountain. There's not just one path. God is not Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, or any of those things. God is God. Humans choose to be Catholic, Lutheran, which would be varieties of Christian, or Jewish, or Shinto, or Zoroastrian. Whatever people choose is their way of approaching that entity.
Yeah, that pretty much answers my question, or my problem with never hearing the word perfect prior to the last 20 years. No one even considered it at that point.
I think that
It's a new concept.
Yeah, I think our ancestors were not as concerned with perfection. And one of the things that I like to tell people, we're not perfect. There's no human being that's perfect, but we are perfectly human. So that's the way, and we can all get better than where we currently are. That's within our power. We're not powerless. We can get better, we can do better, and at a given time, we all do our best because that's what we can do. When people hurt somebody, they don't usually set out to do that. They often do it by overlooking or not paying attention, not caring. On the other hand, yes, I do recognize there are people who seek to hurt others. I'm not naive. But
All
sometimes.
right, well, thanks for
Yeah.
your comment.
And thank you for calling. It was a great question. What does God being perfect really mean? Or does Judaism think of God as perfect? I like to think that we think of God as being God and the source of life. And may you have a wonderful rest of your life. May today be a great day leading into that. So thank you for calling. And it's an interesting question. I think that none of us is perfect. I know, Lord knows, I am far from perfect. Witness today, I had every plan of being in the studio several minutes before I got here, and I am the one to blame for why that didn't happen. I know that. I did a couple of things. Yeah.
Distraction and detainment are just
They just happen.
things in our way all the time.
Yeah. There was something I felt I had to urgently do before I left home, and it took longer than it should have, and it delayed me a couple of minutes, and that's all it takes. Yeah, because so far we don't have a teleporter that works, although I did get a big kick out of the CNN Saturday Night Live skit that has a teleporter. It had a teleporter in the Oval Office, and it teleported two people to be flies on in that. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but when Kamala and Pence debated, there was a fly on Pence's hair.
Oh my.
Yeah. And so they make a joke and they make that into a transporter.
You never get a second
malfunction.
chance to make a first impression with somebody.
Right. And life is interesting. Debates are an interesting phenomena. Thank you to the spontaneity. That's not really the right word because they spend days prepping the candidates for those debates.
And then sometimes they even show up.
And sometimes they show up. Sometimes they're afraid to show up because there is an element of having to go off script in a debate. You have to answer the questions. And it's kind of a test anxiety piece. and people do play games. There's lots and lots of games that are played in debates. So, yeah. I am starting to feel that the old curse that says, may you live in interesting times, I'm not convinced that we're not in that. I think these are definitely interesting times and many, many opportunities to shine as an individual and to care about your fellow human beings, and unfortunately, too many opportunities not to.
Might sound cliche, but they always say, life is what you make it.
Absolutely. You don't have control on the cards that you're dealt,
Right.
but you do have control on how you play those cards and what you
Ah,
do with them, right? None of us can control what the larger world and what other individuals do to us, although certainly some people do try to control others and do exert many times a kind of emotional control over others. And I think that's a serious piece. So, yeah, not always one of the happier, better things, but life is what life is. And so we go from there. Yeah. So we have control over what we do. And I think that if you are looking for something, there's a book out there called Man in Search of Meaning. And that's by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl lived through the Holocaust. He was actually interred in the camps. And one of the things that he had been a psychoanalyst in Vienna before the war, and he determined that he was going to write a book about the experience, and he kept notes. He lost many of his notes, but he was still able to put the book together. And he created is maybe not the right word. He coined the idea of something called logos therapy. Logos is meaning. It's about finding meaning in what you're experiencing, how to make it part of you for a better you. And that's true of all of our experiences, as horrible or devastating as they might be. I'm going to go to some place you might not expect me to go. Brian Mast addressed the graduation of Kaiser. And one of the things that he said to the Kaiser students was that when he was in bed after the device exploded and took his legs away, was that his father said to him, are you going to let this define you, or are you going to be you despite this? And I think that that's the key, right? It was a turning point for him, which is what he was telling the graduates. The things that happen to you don't define you. It's what you do with them that defines you. I think that's an important piece. And yeah, I think that's an important message. At my own graduation, my very first degree, a gentleman named Ashley Montague addressed us, and he said, you are what you do, and you do what you want. If you don't like what you are, then change what you do. I'll go ahead and repeat that, although he also said in that address, never repeat for emphasis. Got that? Never repeat for emphasis. So you are what you do, and you do what you want. If you don't like what you are, then change what you do. And the version of that that I like to use with my clients is that I'll ask them, where do you want to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? What do you want to be defining you in the future? And so let's look at where you are now, and how do you bridge that gap to get to where you want to be? Because as long as we're moving toward that goal, then there can be peace inside you because you're making progress. And it's surprising how much progress people can make very quickly. And sometimes it takes longer. Everybody's an individual. No two people are going to have the same goals. No two people are going to be coming from the same place. And no two people are going to get there in the same way. And that's perfectly human. That's perfectly human. I guess that's part of what I mean by being perfectly human is the ability that we all have to make our lives into what we like. If you don't like what it is, you won't stay there. You'll make a change. It might require stepping back. It might require some upheaval in your life. And it's going to take being unhappy with the current situation to be willing to work through that upheaval. But you can do it.
Well, the end of something is always the beginning of something else.
Right.
So you can always just transition.
Yeah, you transition, you close a chapter and open a new page, and it's a brand new page, and it isn't all splotchy until you make it that way. Or life makes it that way for you, right? Sometimes things land out of the sky and they just happen. And that's part of life, and you know what? That's okay. Life happens, and it's never that you can't pick yourself up. And yeah, some things look like you can't ever do them, but then you do them and you discover you've got the strength to get through that.
Well, we'd imagine what it would be like if we were to lose both of our legs, you know, and how we'd have to transition into a way that you can continue in a normal manner.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's the amazing thing about today's technology and medicine.
Well, yeah, as long as you're still breathing, and the object is to keep that going and to make it as meaningful for yourself as you can, then you've got options. You might not like them. You might not like them. You might have to pick between the two least offensive options. And sometimes that's what life deals us. We don't always get to pick what we want. We have to pick from what's available or what we can make available. And there is an element of we've got to stand on our own 2 feet and make things work out. And it might require some drastic changes. When I moved here from Arizona, yes, it's still hot, but that was a change that my husband and I made in order to be closer to our family. We had, I thought, a pretty good life in Arizona, and miss many of the people there. I keep in touch, thank you to Facebook and the phone, with many of the people there. So I didn't lose my friends, but we had to make a drastic change, and it involved some hardship, and that's just part of life. Life is about making the changes that you need to make. Sometimes they're little, sometimes they're big. When I stepped away from Goodyear to go back to rabbinical school, that was a huge change. It was a financial issue for my husband and me, for our family. We still had to keep a roof over our head and food on the table, but we stopped going out to dinner, right? It's one of the things. And right now, we don't go out to dinner a lot. We do a little bit, but not much. So there are times when you change and scale, and you figure out how to make things work and how to move forward. And if you can't do that by yourself, then by all means, get yourself a therapist, a coach, a counselor, somebody to help you to work through those things, a trusted friend. And the emphasis is on a trusted friend because you want somebody who's going to help you for you and not for any other reason. So yeah, those are all things that we have within our power. And that whether that comes to us out of our faith tradition or out of society and our education, our learning. And it's, I think, one of the reasons why learning is so important, because it teaches us the many different options that we have. And it's not that when we go and learn more, we are more open to more ideas. That, I think, is very important. I often tell parents, or will-be parents, my students, that if of all the things that I can help them with is down the road for their kids, and this is to any listener, give your child as much color, not on the tablet, physical toys with different colors that they can play with. And by all means, please, if you can, in any way, make them learn at least 2 languages, if not 3. And the reason for that is because languages are a really interesting phenomena of the human beings. We need language in order to learn what's in somebody else's mind. What do they know that we don't know, that we can't experience? That's the information, and that's the drive behind learning stories and in hearing news. It's to find out the things that we won't know or wouldn't know if we didn't hear from somebody else who did see or experience it. Language is our way of encapsulating those experiences. And there is not a one-to-one mapping between any two languages that are out there, even if they're close. Yes, you can understand what the other person is saying for the most part, but unless you're really conversant in that language, you're going to miss the puns, you're going to miss the nuances, you're going to miss the subtleties. That's because you can't say things the same way. They don't make sense. You can ask anybody who speaks, say, Spanish and English or Creole and English, if they can say the sentence exactly the way that you said it, word for word, and you can't. The sentence structure, the syntax. See, language is syntax. It's how you put the words together. It's not just vocabulary. And I think that's an important piece. Vocabulary, you can probably do a half-decent job of mapping, but you can't map syntax. And that's actually one of the things that making it full circle that AI doesn't always get right. It tries to follow the rules, but every once in a while, it doesn't sound what a knowledgeable person would say. And that's where professors and teachers get suspicious. And we now have AI detectors. I've even got access to a detector that can detect if you use a humanizer, because the humanizer is an AI tool attempting to break up the algorithm, but what it usually does is it makes the writing worse.
But sometimes when you call for tech support or a bank or any entity, you can tell when it's AI because when
It doesn't do a good job.
Because when you ask a specific question, if it's too specific,
It can't
it
get it.
really kind of gets dumb.
Yeah, yeah. Or it answers some other totally weird thing. The search engines I think are actually getting worse because they're leaning more into AI. And if you pay attention, it works off of keywords.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work off your entire sentence. It tries to guess what you want based on the keywords and the order of your keywords.
I remember an old DOS program when I first started playing around with computers back in the 286 and 386 days. There was this little program that when you're chatting with the chat bot in it, it has a number of keywords that it responds to.
Yeah.
And this was called Chat with Shelia.
Yeah.
And everybody at that time knew that I had a bunch of daughters. So they just thought it was probably the oldest one that's in college or something.
Yeah, okay.
And some of them, when they got a little too risque, Shelia would always say things like, well, my dad's watching over my shoulder, I hope you're careful.
Okay.
And, people thought they were really talking to somebody.
Yeah, when I'm going to really date myself now, when we had our first computer, which I think was an Apple II or a 2E, something like that. It was way back in the early days.
Those were nice in those days, though.
They were nice. I looked down at it and I said, you've got more power than the IBM 360 I learned on.
Yeah.
And, very powerful little desktops. And we took the one that we had and we did a very simple program, my husband and I. And it was just filled with a whole bunch of if-then statements. And what we did is we said, if the string contains this, this, or this, say that. If it contains this, say that. And we set it up for both of our mothers who totally did not understand the computer. And we told them to type in hi. We started the program and had them type in hi. And the computer came back and it said, hi, I'm Apple, who are you? And then when they typed in their name, like for my mother, it said, and hi, how is your son, so-and-so? How's he doing? And when she would answer that, it would ask another question. And they were like, how does the computer know that? Because we know that.
Yeah.
It's what we put in the program. And the same is true with AI. It's only as good as the input that it receives. And it receives, what it does is it scans, it has access just as Google does, or Bing or Yahoo. Remember when Yahoo was a search engine?
Oh, yeah.
And any of those search engines, it has whatever access it's been given, and it's super fast at reading, and it's super fast at skimming and snagging bits and pieces, and then it follows an algorithm to try to put those into English sentences. And that's why its writing is weird. It's just weird. It's not average, everyday student writing. And one of the things that I like to do with that is to ask a student, so how do you handle the explosion of disciplinary institutes or something like that? Because I know they have no idea what they've written. And, so I'll play with the words that AI has given them. And, that's kind
Might
of,
as well, the politicians do.
yeah.
They all use words.
And have
Word
no idea.
salads is what I've heard
Yeah.
it explained as, word salads.
Yeah. Yeah, but using the buzzwords. But students will use words that are just totally not within their realm, and they have no idea. I know I've mentioned it on other shows that we used to have a saying at my alma mater, my first college, that said, sesquipedalian terminology obfuscates the rumination. And sesquipedalian terminology are words. Sesquipedalian is overly ornate, unnecessarily ornate. So unnecessarily ornate words obfuscates, hides the rumination thought. So you can hide the thought by wrapping it in words that are just too fancy.
Word salad is just
Well, it's beyond
over-intrusive
word
upon
salad.
itself, yeah.
It's this word baroque, or it's like this overly done decoration.
It's like when you oversell something,
Yeah,
Like I always say on the Swamp Shop, don't read the whole owner's manual, just give us a brief description.
yeah,
Brief or thorough.
yeah. And strive for accuracy. So again, if students want to use AI, use it to give them ideas to the topics that they should research. When they give me a citation, that's another thing that AI does. It creates citations that are not right. And for whatever reasons, maybe the article that it looked at to snag its stuff had a bad reference in it. Maybe the source location was not right. And if that's the case, then when it snags it for you, it's going to get it not right as well. The other thing that students often do is they'll use older papers, and when they do that, they're using APA 6 and not 7. So there's many ways that teachers know what's going on. We don't penalize all of those things, but we know it. Sometimes it's not worth getting a student in that much trouble.
Especially when it's so obvious.
Yeah.
Because, the AI doesn't really have any feelings about anything. How you feel about something probably doesn't even register.
No. No. That's like expecting Siri to have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Doesn't have. Yeah,
No,
well, she only has what's built into her. So yeah, if you ask her for a joke, she'll tell you one, but it's one of the ones that's in her memory bank.
Yeah, she's got special ones just for you.
Yeah. And that's the bottom line with any of the AI. They can help you put together a letter. They can help you write an invitation. They can take your notes and turn it into meeting minutes. They can help you, here's a good use of it, create some practice questions for me on this subject.
Oh.
And it'll generate multiple choice questions, but make sure they're right. Sometimes you learn things that aren't quite.
Well, the source that that gets the information from might be from one of those fake websites.
Yeah.
Or news site or something.
Yeah, there are many different reasons for things going funky with AI, and that's just some of them. So yeah. Oh, good. Speaking of AI, I love it when my camera does this. Okay, let's. Thank you, Mevo. When I raise my head now, the screen is moving. Yeah, it's decided to pick up the face thing. Let's see if I can.
Recognition, facial recognition.
Yeah, and it does. Sometimes it picks up something behind me, but it does that at the synagogue. There's a mirror that it sometimes thinks is a face. I get a kick out of it watching it because I can see it tracking it. Technology is interesting, but we need it. We use it. It makes our lives easier. The problem, I think, is that especially kids today, they're not tech savvy, they're tech dependent. If they don't have their tech, they don't know how and what to do.
And they're getting so much younger every year when it comes to your grandchildren
hate
and
to
your
tell
cell
you this,
phone. Behave. Don't
Cliff,
let them.
that's us. We're getting older.
I know.
Yeah.
Because they're ready for it.
Yeah.
They take off. They pick up where we leave off.
Yeah.
And they're
Well,
starting early.
The real challenge actually are young people between the ages of 18 and 25 when their prefrontal cortex is not fully formed, but they're convinced that they know everything.
Oh, yes.
That's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And what it says is that the people who know the least act as if they know the most because they don't know enough to know how foolish they sound.
Ooh.
Yeah.
No, they don't.
Right. So the singer who just barely starts learning singing lessons doesn't understand when they're off key and when the rhythm is not right and how others can go, not
There's one
quite."
in every group, too.
Yeah.
And she's usually a young lady who I guess, wants to be a great singer someday, kind of overdoes it a little bit and is a little off key once in a while.
Yeah. It hasn't trained their ear yet well enough to hear. Right? Because a big part of singing lessons is teaching your ear how to hear what you're singing.
Yeah, some musicians cheat by learning to play by ear rather than reading music. I was one of those.
I don't call that cheating. It's a different system. Right? And if you've got it, it's a great method. It's great to listen to something and be able to play it. It's like reading something and retaining it. That has to do with memory. And I don't have nearly enough time to talk about it with only 2 minutes. But another thing that's coming up, especially after COVID, is something called prosopagnosia, which is the difficulties in recognizing and storing memories of faces.
I'm pretty good about that. If I see a face, I kind of recognize it. But if you run into an old friend that you haven't seen in 40 years, you might not recognize them.
There are people who can. They're called super recognizers.
I can look at an elderly person and see what their face looked like when they were a child. I've noticed that a number of years back. But
Okay. Well, that's a skill too.
So
And others can't recognize the person 2 minutes after they talk to them.
yeah.
So again, no two people are alike. We all have different talents and we all have different challenges. So I wish for everyone a really great day, a really great week. And with some luck, I'll be here next week at 10:05 for Ask a Rabbi. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chayin, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast.
And this is WPSL Port St. Lucie.